Blood stained the silk sheets, a stark, violent crimson against pure white. Nathaniel expected to find an assassin waiting in the dark. Instead, he found her, trembling, shattered, and bleeding. But the moment he recognized the scent of the copper-soaked fabric, pity vanished, replaced by a chilling, earth-shattering realization. Rain lashed fiercely against the reinforced floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite, the St. Regis in downtown Manhattan. Nathaniel Cross, the undisputed and heavily feared head of the Cross Syndicate, stepped out of the private elevator. The brass doors sealed shut behind him with a quiet, expensive hiss, locking him inside his two-story fortress. It had been a brutal, exhausting night. The sit-down with the Chicago outfits at an underground speakeasy on the Lower East Side had gone completely sideways, resulting in thinly veiled threats and a shattered mahogany table. Nathaniel simply wanted a scotch, a hot shower, and the silence of his heavily guarded sanctuary. Instead, the distinct metallic scent of fresh blood hit him the moment his Italian leather shoes touched the foyer's imported marble. Nathaniel froze. Decades of surviving the criminal underworld kicked his instincts into overdrive. He slipped his hand beneath his tailored suit jacket, his fingers wrapping around the cold, familiar grip of his suppressed Sig Sauer P226. His breathing shallowed. The penthouse was supposedly impenetrable, secured by a state-of-the-art biometric grid and heavily armed guards in the lobby. Yet a smeared dark red trail stained the pristine cream-colored Persian rug, leading directly from the entryway down the long, shadowed hallway toward his master bedroom. Moving with the silent, lethal grace of a predator, Nathaniel tracked the blood. The heavy oak door to his bedroom was pushed ajar, exactly 1.5 inches. A soft, fractured sobbing echoed from the darkness inside. It was a weeping so broken, so utterly hollow, that it sent an unnatural spike of ice straight into Nathaniel's chest. He kicked the door open, leveling his weapon. The gun lowered instantly, curled into a tight, shaking ball in the center of his California king bed was Penelope Albright. Penelope was a woman of undeniable substance, and Nathaniel had always found her breathtaking. She was heavily built, fat and soft in a world that demanded harsh, sharp edges. She carried her weight with a quiet, timid grace, usually hiding her thick, beautiful curves beneath oversized woolen sweaters and long skirts while she arranged flowers at her small botanical shop on West 43rd Street. Nathaniel had first stepped into that shop 6 months ago to collect a gambling debt owed by her estranged brother, Arthur. He had intended to burn the place down. Instead, he had taken one look at Penelope's wide, terrified hazel eyes, paid the debt himself, and spent the last half-year operating as her silent, unseen shadow, addicted to her warmth. But tonight, the warmth was gone. The custom navy blue Marina Rinaldi evening gown he had anonymously gifted to her for a local community gala was ruined. The luxurious fabric was shredded at the waist, soaked through with a terrifying amount of thick, dark blood. It coated her pale, trembling hands and stained the side of her tear-streaked face. "Penny," Nathaniel breathed, the sound tearing through the quiet room. Penelope flinched violently, pressing her back against the mahogany headboard. Her hazel eyes were blown wide, dilated with pure, unadulterated shock. She looked at him as if he were a ghost, her chest heaving as she struggled to pull air into her lungs. "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice a wet, ragged rasp. "I didn't know where else to go. I just ran. I couldn't go home, Nathaniel. I couldn't go back there. Nathaniel tossed the gun onto the velvet armchair and dropped to his knees beside the bed. His heart hammered furiously against his ribs, a sensation he hadn't felt since his early days on the streets of Hell's Kitchen. The sheer volume of blood on her dress was catastrophic. A wound that severe would be fatal in minutes. He reached for her, his large, calloused hands hovering over her trembling, heavy thighs, afraid to touch her and cause her more agony. "Where are you hit?" His voice was a low, urgent command, shedding the calm Mafia boss exterior and revealing the desperate man beneath. "Penny, look at me. Look into my eyes. Where is the pain? I'm calling a trauma surgeon right now." "Just tell me where you're cut." "No!" she shrieked, a sudden burst of panicked energy surging through her. She grabbed his wrists with her blood-slicked hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. "No doctors. Please, Nathaniel. No police. No doctors. You are bleeding to death on my bed, Penelope," he roared, the fear finally breaking his composure. He grabbed the torn edge of the blood-soaked navy fabric at her waist. Without waiting for her permission, he ripped the seam upward, desperate to find the gunshot wound or the knife laceration so he could apply pressure. The heavy fabric gave way, exposing her soft, pale stomach and the curve of her wide hips. Nathaniel stared. He blinked, his mind struggling to process the visual information. There was no bullet hole. There was no slash. Her skin, though smeared with drying, sticky red streaks, was completely intact. Flawless. He grabbed her arms, checking her wrists, pushing aside the ruined sleeves. Nothing. He checked her neck, her back, running his hands over her heavy frame with frantic precision. She wasn't injured. Not a single scratch. Nathaniel sat back on his heels, the air leaving his lungs in a heavy rush. He looked at the vast pool of crimson soaking into his expensive mattress, and then he looked at the blood coating Penelope's trembling hands. "Penny," Nathaniel said slowly, his voice dropping an octave, turning colder, sharper. The realization washed over him, completely altering the gravity of the room. "Whose blood is this?" Penelope stared at him, her chest rising and falling in shallow, erratic jerks. The heavy silence of the penthouse stretched out, amplified by the thunder rumbling over the Manhattan skyline. She pulled her torn dress tightly around her thick body, suddenly overwhelmingly conscious of her weight and her vulnerability under his intense, analyzing gaze. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I didn't mean to do it," she whispered, her voice trembling so violently her teeth chattered. "I swear to God, Nathaniel, I just went to the gala, like the card said. I wore the dress you sent. I just wanted to feel beautiful for one night." Nathaniel's eyes darkened. He moved closer, sliding onto the mattress beside her. He didn't care about the gore, ruining his $3,000 suit. He reached out, taking her heavy, blood-stained face between his large palms. His touch was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence surrounding them. "Breathe, Penny," he murmured, his thumbs wiping away the tears that cut clean tracks through the dried blood on her cheeks. "You are safe here. Nobody in this city can touch you in this room. Tell me exactly what happened. Whose blood are you wearing?" She squeezed her eyes shut, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. "Richard," she choked out. "Richard Caldwell." Nathaniel's entire body went rigid. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Richard Caldwell was his underboss, his second in command. the man who had run the syndicate's waterfront operations for over 12 years. "Caldwell," Nathaniel repeated, his voice dangerously quiet, stripped of all emotion. "What did Richard do to you?" "I was at the Pierre Hotel," Penelope stammered, opening her eyes to meet his furious, dark gaze. "I got overwhelmed by the crowd in the ballroom. I felt like everyone was staring at me, laughing at my size. I just wanted to find a quiet place. I wandered into the restricted corridors near the service elevators. I heard voices, angry voices." She paused, swallowing hard, her fleshy shoulders shaking. "It was Richard. He was on the phone. I was talking to Victor from the Bratva. I recognized the name because I've heard you say it when you visit the shop." "Nathaniel, Richard gave them the security codes to the underground garage at this building. He told them you were coming back from the Lower East Side alone tonight at midnight. He said, 'Put 2 in his chest and take the crown.'" Nathaniel's jaw clenched so hard his teeth groaned. The pieces slammed into place, the tension with the Chicago outfit, the sudden absence of his usual security detail tonight. It was a coordinated distraction. Caldwell had sold him out. If Nathaniel hadn't left the sit-down 30 minutes early, out of sheer frustration, he would have walked directly into a Russian execution squad in his own garage. "He heard me," Penelope sobbed, the memory pulling her into a state of sheer panic. "I stepped backward and my heel snapped. I fell against a catering cart. Richard hung up and came around the corner. He had a gun. He recognized me. He said he knew you had a soft spot for the fat florist, and that leaving my body in an alley would send you a message." Nathaniel's vision tinted red. A murderous, primal rage clawed at his throat. He would not just kill Richard Caldwell. He would dismantle the man piece by piece. "He grabbed me," she continued, her hands hovering over her chest, mimicking the struggle. "He was so strong. He pushed me against the wall, shoved the gun under my chin. He told me to shut up. He said nobody would miss a pig like me. I thought I was going to die. I thought about you, Nathaniel. I thought about how you would walk into that garage and they would slaughter you. I couldn't let them take you." "Penny, what did you do?" Nathaniel asked, his voice raw, almost reverent. "There was a champagne tower," she whispered, looking down at her bloody hands as if they belonged to a stranger. "On the catering cart beside me." He turned his head for 1 second to check the hallway. I grabbed a bottle of Dom Perignon. I smashed it against the marble pillar. He turned back and raised the gun, and I just lunged. She broke down again, burying her face in her hands. I drove the broken glass into his neck. I didn't stop. He fought me. He pulled my dress. He tried to shoot. But I just put all my weight on him and pressed the glass deeper until he stopped moving. There was so much blood, Nathaniel. It sprayed everywhere. He died on the floor, right in front of me, and I just ran out the service doors. I didn't know where to go. I came here." Nathaniel stared at the weeping woman on his bed. The underworld believed Nathaniel Cross was a monster. They feared his ruthlessness, his cold calculation. But looking at Penelope Albright, a civilian, a gentle, plus-sized florist who spent her days arranging lilies and hydrangeas, he realized he had never seen true loyalty until tonight. She had taken a life. She had brutally murdered a hardened, armed Mafia underboss with a broken bottle, using her own body weight to overpower him, solely to protect a kingpin she barely knew. Instead of horror, a profound, obsessive devotion locked into place within Nathaniel's chest. He didn't pull away. He leaned forward and wrapped his strong arms around her thick, trembling waist, pulling her heavy, blood-soaked body firmly against his tailored chest. He buried his face in her messy hair, breathing in the scent of copper and her faint lavender shampoo. "You're not a monster, Penelope," he whispered fiercely against her temple, sealing his promise to her in the bloody darkness of the room. "You are a queen, my queen, and I swear to God, the men who forced you to do this tonight will beg for a death as quick as the one you gave Caldwell." Nathaniel did not let go of Penelope for a long, agonizingly quiet time. The storm outside battered the penthouse glass, a violent symphony that perfectly matched the chaotic drumming of his heart. Finally, when her violent shaking subsided into exhausted rhythmic hiccups, he shifted. He slid one strong arm under the heavy curve of her thighs and the other across her broad back. With a grunt of effort that betrayed no weakness, only absolute devotion, he lifted her off the ruined mattress. Penelope gasped, instinctively clutching his broad shoulders. She was acutely aware of her size. She had spent her entire life apologizing for taking up space. "Nathaniel, put me down. I'm too heavy." "Quiet, Penny," he interrupted, his tone brokering no argument. "You are exactly as you should be. You weigh nothing to me." He carried her out of the blood-drenched bedroom and down the hall into the master ensuite. The sprawling bathroom was a masterpiece of imported grey Carrara marble and brushed gunmetal fixtures. He set her gently on the edge of the massive, sunken soaking tub. The bright vanity lights illuminated the sheer horror of her appearance. The dried blood had crusted in her thick, gorgeous auburn hair and caked beneath her fingernails. Moving with the clinical precision of a man who had cleaned up many chaotic scenes, Nathaniel turned on the brass faucets, adjusting the temperature until steam billowed into the cold room. He knelt before her, entirely ignoring the ruin of his own tailored suit. His large hands moved to the shredded waist of her navy gown. "May I?" he asked softly, looking up into her wide, hazel eyes. She swallowed hard, a fresh tear tracking through the crimson on her cheek. She nodded once. With absolute reverence, Nathaniel peeled the ruined fabric away from her skin. He did not look at her with pity, nor did he look at her with the crude, demeaning judgment she had endured from men her whole life. As the ruined dress fell to the marble floor, leaving her in only her lace undergarments, Nathaniel looked at her thick thighs, her soft, pronounced stomach, and the heavy, beautiful slope of her breasts, with nothing but pure, unadulterated worship. He guided her into the warm water. As she sank beneath the surface, the water instantly bloomed into a murky, terrifying pink. Nathaniel took a plush washcloth, lathered it with an expensive sandalwood body wash, and began the meticulous process of scrubbing Richard Caldwell's lifeblood from her skin. He washed her trembling shoulders. He gently scrubbed the back of her neck. He took her hands. The hands that had driven a broken champagne bottle into a mobster's throat to save his life, and cleaned every single crevice of her fingers. "I thought I was going to die in that hallway," Penelope whispered, her voice echoing off the tile. "He looked at me like I was garbage, like my life meant absolutely nothing because I wasn't some skinny, connected socialite." "Richard was a dead man the second he put his hands on you," Nathaniel replied, his voice a low, gravelly promise as he poured warm water over her hair. "He just didn't know it. You were merely the executioner of my will tonight, Penelope. You did what had to be done." As he wrapped her in a massive, heated cotton towel, Nathaniel's encrypted satellite phone vibrated in his jacket pocket on the floor. He stepped away, picking it up. The caller ID flashed the name Sullivan Hayes, his top fixer, a ghost in the New York underworld, who specialized in making massive problems disappear before the NYPD even caught the scent. "Talk to me, Sullivan," Nathaniel commanded, his eyes never leaving Penelope as she huddled on a velvet stool, drying her hair. "Boss, we have a situation." Sullivan's voice crackled through the secure line, sharp and urgent. "I got a cleanup crew to the service corridor at the Pierre Hotel. Caldwell is dead. It's a mess. But we're bagging him and bleaching the marble now. No cops yet. But that's not the main issue. Get to the point." "We checked Caldwell's pockets," Sullivan continued. "He had a secondary burner phone. The last message he received was a text sent 10 minutes before the altercation. It was an exact location pin for the service elevators, along with the message, 'She's hiding by the catering carts. Take her, and my debt is wiped.'" Nathaniel's blood turned to ice. "Who sent the text, Sullivan?" There was a heavy pause on the line. "We ran the cell tower ping. The number traces back to Arthur Albright, Penelope's brother." Nathaniel gripped the phone so tightly the plastic casing groaned. Arthur, the pathetic gambling act whose life Nathaniel had spared just to get close to Penelope. Arthur had owed a massive debt to Victor Volkov and the Bratva. To clear his ledger, Arthur had not only provided Caldwell with Nathaniel's security blind spots, but he had actively fed his own sister to the wolves as a hostage. "Secure the hotel," Nathaniel ordered, his voice devoid of all humanity. "Then pull Dominic and the strike team. I want the underground garage of the St. Regis locked down. The Russians are waiting for me down there. And Sullivan? Find Arthur. I don't care if he's hiding in a sewer in Queens. Find him and chain him to a radiator." He hung up. Penelope was looking at him, her hazel eyes wide with fresh fear, clutching the towel tightly around her heavy frame. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Did the police find him?" Nathaniel walked over to her. He knelt, taking her soft, warm face in his hands. He couldn't tell her about Arthur. Not yet. She had already endured enough betrayal and violence for one night. "Everything is being handled," Nathaniel lied smoothly, pressing a fierce, possessive kiss to her forehead. "You are going to stay in this room. My men will be right outside the door. Do not let anyone in unless it is me. I have some garbage to take out." The underground parking garage beneath the St. Regis was a sprawling cavern of concrete, harsh fluorescent lights and shadows. Normally, it was a quiet sanctuary for Maybachs and armored Cadillacs. Tonight, it was a killing floor. Nathaniel stepped out of the service elevator, a suppressed submachine gun hanging from a tactical sling across his chest. Behind him walked Dominic Russo, and 6 of the syndicate's most lethal enforcers, all clad in black, their weapons drawn. Across the garage, near Nathaniel's designated parking bay, stood a blacked-out, heavily armored Mercedes Sprinter van. 4 men in dark trench coats were huddled near it, checking their weapons, waiting for Nathaniel's private town car to arrive. Victor Volkov's hit squad. They didn't even hear Nathaniel coming. "Light them up," Nathaniel whispered. The silence of the garage was instantly shattered by a deafening chorus of suppressed gunfire. The tactical strike was flawless. 3 of the Russian operatives dropped before they could even unholster their weapons, their bodies hitting the cold concrete with sickening thuds. The 4th man, a heavily scarred lieutenant with a shaved head, managed to dive behind a concrete pillar, returning blind fire. Dominic moved like a phantom, flanking the pillar and driving the butt of his rifle brutally into the back of the Russian's skull. The man collapsed, groaning in agony. Nathaniel walked forward slowly, his dress shoes crunching over shattered glass. He stood over the bleeding Russian operative, leveling his weapon at the man's face. "Victor sent boys to kill a king," Nathaniel sneered, his voice echoing in the damp air. "Tell your boss that his alliance with Richard Caldwell died bleeding on the floor of the Pierre Hotel tonight. Tell him the Cross Syndicate is king, the waterfront, the docks, and every shipment that comes through Brooklyn. If Victor steps out of line again, I will mount his head on my boardroom table." He kicked the man brutally in the ribs, leaving him gasping for air on the pavement, and turned to Dominic. "Clean up the bodies. Leave him alive to carry the message. We have one more stop." 30 minutes later, Nathaniel's armored SUV pulled up to a dilapidated, neon-lit motel on the outskirts of Astoria, Queens. The rain was still pouring in sheets. Sullivan Hayes was waiting outside room 104, smoking a cigarette under the awning. He nodded as Nathaniel approached and unlocked the cheap wooden door. Inside, Arthur Albright was tied to a rickety wooden chair. He was bruised, sweating profusely, and sobbing. When he saw Nathaniel walk in, Arthur's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. "Mr. Cross," Arthur begged, struggling against the zip ties cutting into his wrists. "Please, I didn't have a choice. Victor was going to break my legs. He was going to kill me over the debt." Nathaniel didn't say a word. He walked slowly across the stained carpet, grabbed a wooden desk chair, and sat down directly in front of Arthur. He stared at the pathetic, sniveling man. This was the man who shared Penelope's blood. This was the man who had traded a pure, beautiful woman's life to save his own miserable skin. "You texted Caldwell," Nathaniel said softly. "It wasn't a question." Arthur choked on a sob. "They promised they wouldn't hurt her. They just wanted to use her as leverage against you. They knew you were obsessed with the fat girl." The words had barely left Arthur's mouth before Nathaniel moved. His fist shot out like a piston, colliding with Arthur's jaw with a sickening crack. Arthur's head whipped to the side, blood spraying from his split lip. "Do not ever speak of her like that again," Nathaniel hissed, grabbing Arthur by the throat and squeezing until the man's face began to turn a mottled shade of purple. "Penelope is a goddess. She is twice the human being you will ever be. She killed Caldwell tonight. She drove glass into his neck and watched him bleed out to protect me. She is a queen, and you are a rat." Nathaniel released his grip, letting Arthur gasp for air. He pulled a sleek, silver hunting knife from his belt. "I am not going to kill you, Arthur," Nathaniel said, his voice deadly calm. "Only because Penelope's heart is too soft, and she would mourn you. But you are going to disappear. You will get on a cargo ship, heading to South America tonight. You will never contact her. You will never return to New York. And you will never speak my name again. Because if you do—" Nathaniel pressed the flat of the cold blade against Arthur's cheek. "I will not send Sullivan. I will come for you myself." By the time Nathaniel returned to the penthouse at the St. Regis, the sun was just beginning to peek over the East River, casting a pale grey light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The bloody mattress had been completely replaced by his cleaning crew. The room smelled of bleach and lavender. Penelope was awake. She was sitting in the velvet armchair by the window, wearing one of his oversized white button-down shirts. It draped over her thick, gorgeous curves, making her look incredibly small yet undeniably powerful. Nathaniel took off his ruined jacket and walked toward her. He dropped to his knees in front of her chair, resting his hands on her soft, heavy thighs. "Is it over?" she asked softly, her voice raspy from crying. "It's over," Nathaniel promised, looking up into her eyes. "Caldwell is gone. The Bratva has been dealt with. You are safe. You will always be safe with me, Penny." She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the hard line of his jaw. The innocence of the florist was gone, replaced by a dark, beautiful understanding of the world she had just violently entered. She had shed blood for this man. She had claimed her place at his side. "They won't stop, will they?" she whispered. "Because of who you are." "Let them try," Nathaniel replied, burying his face in the soft warmth of her stomach, finally finding his peace. "They will learn what happens when they threaten the Queen of the Cross Syndicate." Wow, what an incredible and dark journey. Penelope went from a quiet, self-conscious florist to a fierce Mafia queen who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty to save the man she loves. Nathaniel's absolute devotion to her, protecting her from her own brother's betrayal, proves that true love in the underworld is ruthless. If you loved this dramatic Mafia romance and want more thrilling stories, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel now.